Hi, can you hear me?
Can hear. How's it going? We live or what?
We are. We are. I know we wanted to have a 15-minute, but uh,
I know, that was the hope, and I dealing with a few things besides a
yeah,
chaotic Sunday night. Not even the Leaf games chaos here, but tech issues as well. But it's all good.
yeah. Well, I may get evacuated at any moment. There's a huge fire on the edge of our subdivision.
Oh wow.
My daughter's house is about 100 or so yards from it. She's potentially getting evacuated. I'm in a completely brick house with a concrete tile roof, so I'm safer here than I am going anywhere else. but
Wow.
yeah,
Okay, that's pretty intense.
fun and games. Um, so thanks for coming on.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
Look at that. I've seen myself on Twitter. I've never done this before. Is there a delay?
yeah. So we're on 7 different feeds right now.
Oh, good
Um,
stuff.
I don't normally use the main platform of Restream. I normally go through OBD, but trying to bring somebody else on through that is a nightmare. So um, we just as it says at the top, unscripted and uncensored.
That's right.
We won't mention the V word because this is being broadcast on YouTube.
Oh,
Um,
come on. It's not. They don't censor that term still.
I don't know. You just posted that about 5 hours ago.
Um, did I do it on YouTube? Oh no, on Twitter I
No,
posted.
on Twitter, you actually mentioned don't use the V word.
No, yeah, in the past you couldn't. In the past,
I
I was
know.
told not to do it. I thought it was done though, but so after that, I actually went to test it out on Facebook. Let's see if the post got taken down. Um, I actually have I don't have I have a Facebook account for my another device. Okay, it's still there. Um,
Most of the time, I've found now that it's typically if somebody reports it.
uh,
Outside of that, I mean, pretty much the same as most of the responses by the authorities throughout the last 5 years. As I said at the beginning of 2020, it's not the people said, oh, the police will be banging on your doors. I said they don't have the resources. I said what your biggest problem is going to be your neighbour. It's going to be them phoning on you, and just like they did many years ago, it's the people that report you that are the problem. Um, and I suppose moving on to the first point on this, the ostrich farm. I mean, the way CFIA got involved in that was because somebody reported anonymously
is
that
that what happened?
they're birds. So that's what's being said. One
Okay.
thing I want to make clear is there's no point in talking to. I mean, everybody says talk to the owner. Well, I've listened to the owner be interviewed. I've had people ask her questions, and they don't tally with every other interview she's given, public information, their own LinkedIn feed. At that point, as a retired police officer, there's no point in talking to her. If you're not going to be open and honest, if you're not going to be consistent with your answers, then I'm going to go by what's actually being published and the evidence that's available to me. And the thing is that from everything I'm seeing, I don't know why this has been like COVID. Nobody asked the right questions. All the answers were there. Everything was really obvious that these are not pets. These are not. And one thing I'll make clear: I'm. We've had 15 rescue dogs. My wife's been has worked in animal rescue for 30 years here in Canada. I do not believe in culling any animals for no reason. But I have a lot of questions, and everybody who's going to this farm and screaming about this farm, as I, it, one, from what I can see right now, is two things: either they're fighting against big pharma, or these poor animals, they're their pets. The reality is neither one of those is true based
Well,
on.
there's 400 ostriches that nobody has 400 pets. So I don't think that was ever on the table.
Well,
I
well,
did ask, by the way, what their names were, because that if they're right, why if they're 400 names, actually I'll do that now.
farmers will do that even with animals that they're breeding to be slaughtered. They'll still give them names. It's
Oh,
not.
really?
Oh yeah, it's not uncommon.
And
That
eat them too, though?
oh
Or
yeah,
they
oh yeah, and they'll eat them
okay.
themselves. They'll actually name them and be sitting at the dining table and eating them. So that's not a gauge of whether they're a pet.
Is that an Alberta thing?
The point is, this farm, 4 generations allegedly. I've been able to go back a few decades.
Got this weird
Where you've got some sunlight, I
a
think.
glare. It's the
Yeah,
sun in my multi-million-dollar condo here that I from all the grifting we do online, all us anti-vaxxers.
yeah. Well, there are some. Anyway, from what I've been able to find, their business pre-2020 was the cosmetic industry and meat industry. That's primarily what they did. None of these animals were being saved. They were all to be used for profit. That you don't say, "Oh, my poor animals." Let's
But
just assume nothing happened in 2020 and they were still doing what they always did. Would people be complaining that these food animals were being slaughtered because, like in BSE and everything else? Would they still be going down there? No, they're going down there because, well, these animals are not going in the food chain, which is not quite right. But it's because we don't want them slaughtered. We want to keep them. Well,
yeah,
even in their own court filings, they want to keep them for their research value.
okay.
Okay, when did we start supporting researchers in the freedom movement? Particularly researchers involved in masks, COVID. I,
But they're not inconsistent. Like, I mean, I don't have a view on it one way or the other. I mean, research is important, but like there's no unified agreement on this, is there? Like in terms of whether to do
so
this type of
so the researcher out of Japan, who's government funded, that has been working with them, and in her own statements, including on LinkedIn and other public statements going back uh, since 2020, she's working directly. In fact, she part owns a bio company out of Calgary that is co-owned with this researcher. So, I mean, she said publicly and at the grounds recently, she's not involved with them, but you are, and you're not trying to hide it. It's on the LinkedIn. It's on her own LinkedIn profile. This Calgary lab called Struthio Bioscience for just over 4 years it running, and they produce antibodies that are to be infused into masks. In 2020, they were doing it for COVID treatments. Basically, as a replacement for COVID vaccines, you would wear, and for COVID tests as well. Instead of taking a COVID test or the COVID vaccines, which we all have our opinions on, and certainly anybody who's watching this is not in favor of either of those two things, they were actually producing masks to be used for COVID tests and masks to be used for basically a COVID type vaccine that you would have to wear. Well, masks are harmful. In the way that they were used during COVID, there is no question whatsoever they're harmful. There isn't any dispute on that. The science is settled. And
well,
I've
yeah,
been,
but the science wasn't. I mean, at the time, the science was in 2020, 21. There's still science was still ongoing,
no,
but
in 2020, um, every single one of the health agencies, the majority of the world, and certainly in Canada, already had evidence that said the masks are not doing any good. In fact, they're doing harm. They
the
pushed
way
them
they
anyway.
the way they were being used
And that's
by
the problem, is the way they were being used. But the
right.
way they were being used from 2-year-olds up, which is still the case here in Alberta. If we have an outbreak of 2 cases of COVID in Alberta today, and you take your child to go visit grandma in a care home or at a hospital, they require you to put a mask on a 2-year-old. No, but it would have been great if we'd have had these COVID infused antibody masks, which don't seem to have been tested anywhere. Everybody complains about the testing, but seriously, this is what we're saving these animals for. Is this because all these antibodies, the way they're delivering them to people, is through these infused masks. That to me is just pure insanity.
Well,
And yet,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, you say that to the freedom movement, and they say no, they're not. Well, it's in their public statements. And how did they get the antibodies? So the researcher they're working in has worked with swine flu, avian flu, COVID, and a bunch of other viruses. And this farm has worked on nothing other than basically biological experiments, injecting their ostriches with viruses, because that's the only way it can do it. The researcher states quite clearly in 2022, he was saying, this is how we get the antibodies from these ostriches. He's got a farm in Japan with 500 ostriches. They're injected with the virus, with the spike protein. Where did they get the spike protein from in 2022? That would have been biohazardous material. Whether you believe it's real or not, where did they get it from? And like, everybody's complaining about how Wuhan, a level 3, 4 biolab, let that virus out of the biolab, and they had it at their farm. They went from being farmers selling meat and cosmetic products to running a biolab in 2020.
Wasn't it? I thought I don't know much about the particular case of the ostrich. Wasn't it that they did have it was H1N1 at the time? Like, that's what CFI is concerned about.
So H5N1 avian
Yes,
flu.
sir.
So again, this research has been working with that. So we can talk. Everybody wants to only focus on avian flu and the culling of this herd because of avian flu. Frankly, I think that's a misdirect, and I think it's a deliberate misdirect.
Well,
because this is a farm that they say they haven't been selling meat products or anything else. None of this has gone into the food chain or the cosmetic industry. The LinkedIn chain says otherwise, and they're selling of product to a farmer. The Swan, I can't remember the names now. The Swankies in Whitecroft Valley. They sold 6 birds to them in 2021. They were already experimenting with COVID at that point. So, and these were ostriches that were meant to be put into the food chain. So they got ostriches from the farm that had been a biolab type environment as a business model since 2020. So for 18 months almost, they'd been a biolab, and they were selling ostriches for somebody to farm to go in the food chain. That seems to be a bit strange to me. This is not my information. This is not me making something up. These are published articles where they're quoted. So,
but I think the concern, concern here,
I
think people, it's in the public domain. People know about it, whether people are as concerned, right, as everyone.
Not, it's being denied, even though it's in the public domain. It's being denied at the farm right now by the people who are doing interviews. They're denying any of this is happening. They're not selling it for food. And
they're denying that they're selling it for food.
They're all denying it. That's not happened. That has not happened since 2020.
That right. These are not food. These are not being sold for food.
But they are. They sold 6 birds to the Swankies in June 2021. And
a while ago.
No. Post-COVID injections. They were injecting their birds. Their business model was supposed to be 100% biosciences, experimenting on these birds to create antibodies to be infused into masks to test for and treat COVID in 2020. That was their business model. That's always been their business model since 2020. That's not true. They were selling birds after that. And so what was in those birds? What are those birds that they bear in mind? This researcher is researching avian flu, COVID, swine flu. He's injecting birds with every single pathogen you can think of to see if they'll produce antibodies. If they've been experimenting and their sole business model is experiments, how have they survived for the last well, 5+ years since 2020 on that business model. They had 500 birds in 2020. They've got 400 now. How did they survive on that? Basically, a biolab type environment business model. If they
Yeah,
went, I mean, these are questions that I'm trying to get answers to. And if they would, because again, the research says
the more pressing concern is that you've got people that are going to show up without a warrant in the next couple of days, or I don't know what it is.
they don't need a warrant. Again,
Right?
based
They
on
don't need a warrant.
the legislation, they've wiped out millions of birds across the UK and across Canada over the last X amount of months because of this thing. I don't agree with that, but it's happened.
Right. It has happened.
Why has no other farm got the attention this one has got? And this farm has got birds that are not being used in the food chain, are not being used they're being used to be experimented on. Quick question. What is the most likely thing that Occam's razor, a farm that has been injecting birds with pathogens, including avian flu, working with a researcher for the last 5 years, their flock has 2 birds that die of avian flu. Is it more likely that they introduced the pathogen or some wild duck introduced the pathogen? Which story sounds the most likely?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like
No.
Wuhan. We don't really know what's,
So here's nobody wants to ask that question. And all you get is, well, she's answered the question. She
what did
said that
what did the court records show? What did the experts' reports show?
So when you bring in doctors from the freedom movement on the COVID side as your expert witness in a veterinary, you know as well as I do, the courts are going to go, they're not experts. They say, oh, our experts were dismissed. Did you see the list of experts? Byron Bridle is not an expert in poultry and avian flu. That's not his expertise. The courts are not going to, you know as well as I do, the courts will only accept an expert who is credible. They don't need to be qualified, but they have to be credible. The experts they brought in were never, it's like so many of these court cases we've seen through COVID. They never actually brought, like court cases, one of the biggest sets of court cases that happened, they had every conspiracy theory on the planet in binders full of documents. Knowing very well the court's going to go, this is nonsense, you're wasting the court's time. And they were dismissed as a result of that. This is another one of them. You don't put an expert witness forward that has no credibility in the area that you want and then complain when he's kicked out.
Well, you do what you got to do within the time and the budget, right? So, and you never know what.
I mean, there's again, how many farms are there across where they've lost a dam site more than this? And this is a farm.
Well, I don't. Do you know the answer to the question? Like, how many culls are there? I don't even know. How many culls are there?
Well, people keep sending me lists, and there's like 14 million birds that have been
culled in Canada
since 2021. Yeah.
No, but this year, let's say in 2025, how many culls have there been?
Thousands. I don't have the exact number. I don't really care, to be frank, because that's relevant. It's not relevant. The relevancy is, so again, everybody's talking about, should these animals be culled? My first question is, what have these animals been injected with? Because you know what? If they've been injected with 20 different pathogens and the CFIA is not testing for them, then I'm sorry, but I can't support. We're talking about the virus that I don't agree did what it did or anything else. I've fought against the narrative from the start. But let's just start with COVID, SARS-CoV-2, MERS. They're zoonotic viruses. They're viruses that have jumped from an animal to humans. That's the allegation. They believe in COVID because they made it their business model in 2020. That is, they can't say, I don't believe in it, because if they do, then they would run in a scam. They would run in fraud. So you say you believe in COVID and you believe it's a pathogen that has transmitted in this way and it's deadly to humans, because otherwise, what's the point? What's the business model if we don't need these masks? So you've got the masks, you've got the COVID. It's a zoonotic virus that jumped from humans to animals. And you're now injecting it without any qualifications, without any any controls whatsoever that would be in place for a biolab into animals that have direct contact with wild animals around. The reality is, if this really happened, how the hell they haven't been arrested for running an illegal biolab? So there's an awful lot of
But to make that assumption, you got to make a
what
couple of
assumption?
leaps.
Okay, what leaps?
That there's a justification for an arrest. You'd have to show
No. So going on the information they've provided,
you think that's enough to incriminate them.
no. Let's. So it isn't. No, absolutely not. Somebody'd have to get a warrant and search. Somebody'd actually have to find out, did they have access to these pathogens on site? But unless I call them a liar and say, I don't believe you ever had it, in which case I'm saying you've been running a scam since day one. They have stated they had dead COVID virus. There's no such thing. RNA viruses are neither live nor dead. There's not.
We got to get an expert to say that. I can't take
Okay.
David Dixon's word for that.
David Speecher will actually give you that information. Yes, I've done the research on it. I actually spent most of 2020 talking to Professor Dolores Cahill from Ireland, who used to run the Max Planck Institute Level 4 Biolab. So I'm not an expert, but I made sure I checked all the boxes before I did make these statements.
Okay.
Because I needed to know what these viruses were. So we know that COVID as a coronavirus was being worked on in Wuhan's lab, which is a level 3-4 biolab. And the restrictions on movement of viruses are very, very strictly controlled. She says in public statements in 2021, they were injecting the ostriches. She was injecting the ostriches with dead COVID virus. There's no such thing as the dead COVID virus. And I mean, give her the benefit of the doubt. She misunderstood what the term spike protein is. If it's not in the person's body, is it alive or dead? It doesn't matter. It's still a pathogen that is infectious and is a controlled substance in Canada and in actually most countries in the world. How did they get their hands on that to be injecting the ostriches?
Right. So that would be
they will not answer that question.
Will that be a Freedom of Information Act request or?
No, but hang on. She's defending herself. She's having parties. Why do we need a Freedom of Information request? Just answer the question.
Where
did you get it from? Where did you get it from? If you're saying you're open and honest and people are not being fair to you, just answer that simple question. Where did you get spike protein from? Because if you got it from the government, then did they authorize you for these uncontrolled experiments that are basically, in a layman's view, and in my view as a police officer, ex-police officer, are highly dangerous? If they're dangerous to be done in a level 3 biolab and level 4 biolab with all those restrictions, doing those same things in a wild ostrich farm in BC with people who are not trained scientists, whose job before this was farmers. You went from farmers to injecting birds so that you would then extract the antibodies from them to be infused in masks for people to wear. I can't think of a more scary scenario. And this was their business model for 5 years. It's still their business model today, according to everything.
So therefore, you're at the end of the day, you're in favor of the mask call because you see this as a potential.
No, I don't, because I don't know at this point in time, are they telling the truth or are they running a scam? Because, seriously,
it doesn't matter.
Because if they haven't been injecting these birds with anything and they've been selling them and doing their old business model for the last 5 years, then there's nothing wrong with the birds and they shouldn't be killed. Really, and that would be, so say that. But you're not saying that. You're saying that for the last 5 years. And they said in court, the value of these birds is in the antibodies from the experiments they've been performing.
Right.
Okay. The experiments are my problem. The experiments are the issue.
Well,
if they are saying they have been injecting them, then what have they injected them with? Where did the avian flu? And they say all our birds are completely, all filled with antibodies, and they're all immune to bird flu. Well, there's at least 2 of them that weren't. They died. Again, how did the avian flu? Have they ever had access to avian flu viruses, antigens, or any other biological material that they've injected these birds with? Because all they've said is they were injecting them with COVID in 2020 and 2021, when they were also selling them to another farm for the food industry, when they were producing cosmetics all the way up to 2024. The website was still live. So why is nobody asking those questions? Because if you answer those questions, and the reality is they were running this like an illegal biolab, injecting these birds with God knows how many pathogens, I think the majority of people's view on, first of all, I suspect most of the people that are down there at the ostrich farm would be running as fast as they could to get away from them if somebody said, "Oh yeah, they've been injected with COVID, with Ebola."
That's where, but that's on. That seems to be open, like in the pub, and that's why the everybody was excited when the dump would take them. I think that was a good move, no? Like, because they didn't test properly for, like, you don't want those things, carcasses, just hanging out in the dump.
I don't want carcasses anywhere. But if they are a biohazard, bear in mind that they wouldn't allow people to take bodies away that had COVID in them. They were treated as a biohazard. Same with a lot of these things. If they have this in them, and they have God knows how many other pathogens that may or may not be dormant in them, all we need is a list of how have you run your business? How have you run your business that is supposedly injecting these animals with multiple viruses for 5 years? If we can get a list of how many pathogens you've injected in them, then maybe, because at the end of the day, if they've been injected with more than one pathogen, I think they should be tested for more than one pathogen. That being said, I don't believe the tests are accurate enough to actually give us an answer anyway. So, they've created an environment, and they're not being honest. They're telling people they're their pets. They're telling people.
Well, that's why. Look, pets. You say I didn't know this. People eat pets with names. Personally, I wouldn't. I thought an absolute defense to this whole thing is you name every one of those 400 birds, and then CFI is like, okay, they're pets. We'll kill them. But even at that, I think they still won't have mercy if they're concerned about right.
If you've got domestic animals that have got rabies, they don't say, "Well, it's a pet. We don't kill it." I mean, again, if you've got pathogens that, so I don't.
One of the people, Joanna Lasoka, what the hell are you talking about? Show the proof of a contagious pathogens. Many exclamation marks. Do you have proof of a contagious pathogen?
So I'm not the one saying they're injecting them with the pathogens. I'm quoting from them. I'm quoting from the Japanese researcher they're working from. I'm quoting from their business model. I'm quoting from the court case. I don't have to prove anything. They have to explain how.
If you say they are injecting them with contagious pathogens,
I'm saying they are injecting them.
Yes, but you're basing that off an article that you've read.
No, on their quotes and their interviews.
Can you pull it up in the chat now? They want to see it. Show us the proof.
If we do that, we're going to be here for 5-6 hours. All the information is published online. It's all on the Twitter.
I think
feed.
It was didn't you sent it or you circulated?
Yeah, I think just all I've got to do again. Say, just hang on a sec. I'm not here to do.
I'm always a stick. Like one of the things I like to do on my Twitter is, like, if I say a fact, I just boom. I have one link. I have one screenshot. Boom. That's the proof, right? I say Ministry of Health said this. Here's the document, like right in the friggin'. So but it just makes it easier.
Okay, so I'm good to go for 5 hours here, and we can go.
I got half an hour to go.
I've got absolutely.
You'll do it.
So just hang on a sec. Let me pull up that.
It shouldn't. Does it take you 5 hours to post a link? Okay. Come on. Hey, it took me 5 hours to figure out how to use this. Whatever this stream is. Rest stream. No offense to Rest Stream if they're a sponsor. We're going.
Okay, so
what is this?
This is the stuff that are posted. So first of all, we won't play the WEF video. That is advertising Sakamoto's masks, which they're
Okay.
helping produce. But anybody can see the link. It's on my Twitter. It's there. I mean, I can play it if you want. Japan researchers use ostrich cells to make glowing COVID detection masks. That's a direct quote. The scientists started by creating a mask filter coated with ostrich antibodies targeting the novel coronavirus.
That is at this farm.
So? Let's see what. Then we go on to ostrich farmer. That's connected to this.
What is when you say connected? What does that mean?
It's one of the farms he's working with, and they cover a bunch of areas. Again, so this is where they're talking about working with nasal sprays for the COVID antibody, the COVID virus created from the same ostriches. So let's see what is happening in BC.
I don't know the names of the ostriches, so I can't even. Do they have identification numbers?
I don't care. I don't care.
They're all the same. Whatever. Okay.
There's 398 of them. I mean, again, if somebody wants to put a list of names, go right ahead. So this is Esperson herself, Karen Esperson herself. Direct quote. Working with the lab back east, we inoculated our hens with the dead COVID-19 virus. Is that not a pathogen?
Well, let's ask the expert-in-chief, ChatGPT. Is injecting a what? Dead COVID virus?
Is COVID-19 a pathogen?
Oh.
You can ask it, is there a difference? If you ask it, is COVID-19 a dead or live virus? It'll tell you there's no such thing. RNA viruses are neither live nor dead. They are RNA viruses. You can't have a dead COVID-19. They're trying to hide behind this word dead to pretend that, it's not a pathogen. It's not, there's no risk to it.
Sorry, what source, what link are you at there?
So this is the BC Ostrich Farms on prpeak.com. This is the interview that Karen gave back in 2021. And she says, we inoculated our hens with dead COVID-19 virus. Last year, we were able to block 99.9% of the coronavirus if it was infused in a face mask. That's her direct quote.
That says a BC farm. Okay, I don't know. Okay, so somebody's saying that was a BC farm. Okay, I don't know if that's relevant concern.
It's BC farm.
Am I being purposely obtuse? Yeah. It's. I'm eliciting. I'm trying to get all the facts. I'm being a bit more confrontational, not just. Yeah. Okay. So
here's the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood gained public attention when the owners refused to evacuate. Whatever. The farm is no longer in danger, and now Karen Esperson and Dave Belinsky can go back to work, saving the world from that nasty little virus. It turns out ostriches have an immune system. When exposed to COVID-19, they quickly create antibodies. How are they exposed to COVID-19? Bear in mind, the world was locked down at this point. Working with a lab back east, we inoculate our hens with the dead COVID-19 virus. The hen produces antibodies in 2 weeks, and 2 weeks after she puts them in her eggs, says Esperson, adding that is one of the reasons they were so hesitant to abandon their 500 birds. 500. How come they've only got 400 now? Where did they go? Because they're not selling them. So where did they go? This very natural process, Wuhan would say their process was quite natural as well. Last year in 2020, we were able to block 99.9% of the coronavirus, COVID, if it was infused in a face mask. Tell me what I got wrong in my statements that I can't back up with her own words.
No, I think the issue is the priority right now is just trying to save the birds.
No. So, okay, let's say they were
That's
rats.
The priority.
Let's say they were rats and this was a biolab instead of ostriches at a farm. Would we be asking these questions, or would the priority be saving them?
Do the rats have names? Are the rats tied? Are they pet rats?
Okay, so if they have, let me ask everybody, if these birds have been infected with COVID-19, and have been allowed to wander free for all this time. Were they the source of the outbreaks in BC? I'm being deliberately obtuse because it's garbage. But how were they doing this? Where did they get COVID-19 to infect the
They,
bird?
so this is
They
like
were working.
it's a good question, but I feel like it's a separate question because right now, like I say, the priority is saving the birds
No,
or
it's
not
not.
saving them.
Your priority might be saving the birds. My priority is finding out should
Oh,
the birds be saved.
well, oh yeah, yeah. Okay, well that's what the court did. And
Because
the court said no, we're not saving these birds. They got to
no,
go.
no, no, no. So that's the problem. The court said no because they only focused on avian flu.
Oh,
Because
right.
everybody's keeping that focus on avian flu.
Oh, I see. You think this is a big, well, a diversion from something more serious?
If they have been injecting, I mean, imagine if it comes out that the federal government has been working with this farm and shipping out deadly pathogens out of the Halifax lab. Some of it went to China and some of it went to BC. Imagine the embarrassment for the federal government if that was the case.
Well, now you're really going down the rabbit. You got to get some
No,
FOIAs.
but I'm asking a question.
Oh
This,
yeah,
this
for sure.
company, this company says this has been their business model. This has been their business model for the last 5 years.
But then why would they fight? Would they just say,
No, no, no. If they don't fight, how much have they made on the GoFundMe?
oh
And,
no,
and
you're
at the
not
end of
going
the
down there?
day, on top of that, you know what? They're bought into. If these birds get killed, they don't have a business.
Um,
They've changed their business to be in the biolab industry based on their own words. And if they lose these birds, yeah, you know what? They just effectively maybe the government just said, "Screw you, we're done with that now, and you're on your own." But
um,
so they would fight to keep the birds. Remember again in the court filings and in all the statements they've made and interviews they've given in the last few days, they want to save these birds because they are valuable for their antibodies, which
right,
is basically a research project, and their antibodies are to be used infused into masks. I don't
right.
want to see anybody in a mask, certainly not a 2-year-old with some pathogen infused from an ostrich egg that God knows where it came from, sourced from the only place they could get it, the government. Or
Oh
either
my,
that or they're lying about everything. Like these, I'm taking them at their word.
no, Bart, you're a lion. I'm not worried about the 400. Yeah, I'm more worried about the three. Well, it's actually 40 million people in Canada. But yes, if there's a risk that these birds can spread H1N1 or whatever, and because the thing mutates too, right? Like it's not like they have the antibodies, but some of these.
One of the ways that they mutate the most, let me just come back to our screen together. I'm just going to close that share. One of the ways these viruses mutate the most and the fastest to make them very unpredictable is by making them zoonotic. So you take them and instead of it transferring from person to person, you now transfer it from person to animal and then transfer it back to person. You are introducing a serious unknown risk.
Yeah.
That is why this type of research is highly controlled. And these are the conversations I've had with a person who ran a level 4 biolab in Germany at the Max Planck Institute. So when I read this story and I take them at their word that this is what they were doing, that terrifies the life out of me as to what is
Well,
actually going on there.
oh, not just there, across
Oh yeah.
Canada, across everywhere.
How many other farms have they done this with? The Canadian government. We know that this research is working with lots of farms. But
I
again,
went to Western.
why are we trying to save the birds based on assumptions that are not true by the words of the owners themselves? The people that are at that farm think they are saving these birds because they're pets, or because they're fighting big pharma.
But
They're the two reasons.
well, that was my other question. It's like I've known a few ostriches in my time. They're not friendly. Like these are not cuddle, like sleep in my bed with me type of birds.
I actually nicknamed them dinosaur raptor chickens.
They're
I mean,
angry animals, aren't they? Aren't they mean?
they are. I mean, people talk about the cobra chickens we have in Canada, the Canadian geese. These are raptor chickens. They are some of the most aggressive animals outside of swans. As a bird, they're some of the most aggressive out there. They're nasty little things. But apparently they taste good. You can get good cosmetics out of them. But
But
again,
can
whether you like them or not,
would you eat a
they shouldn't be
70-year-old bird?
I have no idea. I've never
I
been
just feel
offered.
like it's going to be. I mean, you want something like a
Certainly,
bit.
you know one thing? I wouldn't eat those birds. But I wouldn't. Would you eat?
You'd be,
Would you eat? Would you eat the puppies or the monkeys or the bats that came from, or the rabbits or the chickens that came from Wuhan? Would you eat them?
I'd probably avoid them. I
Yeah.
mean, unless it
So
really
so
made
so,
me
so now
Superman.
let's ask you. You know that this company has been injecting these birds with who knows how many pathogens. We know for a fact, definitely coronavirus, COVID, definitely a fact COVID, and they've been running a business model for 5 years. So
Yep.
based on that, how many different pathogens have those birds been injected with? Would you eat them not knowing what they've been injected with?
I
I
would
mean, we're talking,
definitely.
Jim. People read the back of labels and go, "Oh, this has got seed oils in it. I'm not having that." Well, they've been injecting them with pathogens. Would you go anywhere near? I wouldn't want to go. You know, people have rushed down to the farm. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that farm without a biohazard suit and inspecting everything they've got. I'd want to know the materials that you're using. Where did you get them from? How are you storing them? How are you using them? What protections have you got for people and animals? I don't see any
Lucy's
of that.
asking here: is this not big pharma? What are they talking about? Was big pharma involved in this?
I've no idea. Well, so the researcher from Japan is working with all the big universities who take their funding from big pharma, and they are performing experiments that are typically normally performed by big pharma. You know, and they've been in the cosmetic industry for 20 plus years. Like they've been producing material. They've got their own. Again, if we go to, if we go to, where is it? Let's just pull that one up again. No, let's. Let's pull up Karen's LinkedIn, her LinkedIn profile.
Lila Maev has to answer. You have to answer both questions. This not big pharma?
I don't know.
What are they talking about? Yes, it's big pharma. We're talking about whether big pharma has an indirect or direct stake into this ostrich farm. Is that the question? We don't know.
I have no idea. I mean,
Big pharma has a stake in everything. I mean, it's just a matter of how much, what they're,
so
you know.
so this is. Let me just share screen share. Share. Why is that not coming up? Okay. Basically, on her LinkedIn profile, she's
Yeah, I saw that. I saw you posted that earlier. You took the screenshots.
She talks about she's got Omega Ostrich, Onu Body Care, which is run since 2012, which gets its products directly from Omega Ostrich, which is actually Universal Ostrich Farms, which is still selling meat, oil. According to this, it says 2001 to present, we produce meat, oil, hides, eggs, and feathers, and neutralizing COVID-19 antibodies. And we're working hard to find the right company to put these antibodies into a nasal spray. You know, everybody's freaking out about a nasal spray vaccine for COVID. They're producing one.
When was that? When was that from, though?
This is from a current LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, I guess for people that are scared of needles.
Nobody, if COVID was deadly, everybody in the care homes would have been dead by January of 2020. There were no restrictions in place, and whatever was going around before that. The government admits that whatever they call COVID was circulating worldwide no later than November of 2019. It was in this country and in the US and in the UK by no later than January, and most likely as early as October to November. We went between 3 and 5 months without a single restriction in place on a virus that was allegedly replicating with an R5.6 replication rate. Everybody would have been dead, including, and even when they did lock down, their lockdowns were ridiculous. I know what the actual lockdown protocols they were trying to implement were. They were from a NATO plan developed in 1989, which I participated in as a police officer in Liverpool back in 1989. And it was designed to respond to World War III incidents, nuclear, biological, chemical. And it's the only plan in the government's arsenal where they isolate healthy people. If we'd have actually done what that plan expected, we'd have had trucks rolling in the streets with armed hazmat army people and police officers shooting anybody who left the house. That didn't happen. People were still allowed to go to grocery
That was in the protocol document?
That is in the protocol document.
Wow. To
That's,
shoot unarmed people who leave their homes.
we're talking about a risk to the general population. You know, people want to talk about culling animals. NATO's plan, implemented by every NATO country for the police and armed forces in response to a World War III biological, chemical, or nuclear attack, is to force healthy people back into hot zones to let them die because it's the least of the worst. If you want to know where the culling animals comes from, it comes from a plan that NATO produced for human beings.
What's that document called?
You won't see it. Go sign go sign the Secrecy Acts, which I've done in Canada and the UK because I was a police officer in the UK and because I do national security work here in Canada. I reached out to my national security people at CSIS and at the equivalent of MI5 back at the beginning of 20, and asked them. I said, what I'm seeing in Italy and various other places is them starting to roll out the response plan for World War III. Please tell me that's not happening. I said, because I know what we tested back in 1989, and the response I got back from GCHQ was, yes, that's exactly what we're rolling out. I said, then people are going to die. Not whether there's any virus or any danger at all. This plan will cause people.
That was the same plan they had in hospitals when they had to do triage for for who would get the respirators and who would be forced to die.
Yeah, so, I mean, it went beyond that. The problem is nobody was at risk, because if they were, the way they responded by letting people go to supermarkets and nobody was in the care homes. The care workers weren't wearing the masks all the time. They were actually mixing with each other. And it's like, a pathogen is not only infectious when you've got your mask on. People used to say, oh, I'm smart enough to know I should be, that I might be asymptomatic. Well, then I assume you're smart enough to know you might be asymptomatic all the time, when you're in the shower, when you're at sleep. But don't wear a mask when you're showering, because in Canada, it's still illegal to waterboard, even if you're doing it to yourself. I mean, like, the insanity of how we implemented the restrictions were implemented in such a way that they cause more harm than good, even whether we had a pathogen or not. The point is, this pathogen that everybody's saying, you've got some people saying it doesn't exist, or it does exist, or it was deadly, or it wasn't deadly. The point is, this organization that people are trying to protect right now, because they're not saving them for the ostriches, they're saving them from the farm.
Look,
if they wanted the ostriches to be safe, they'd ask them to be moved away from a biolab. You know what I would support? Those ostriches being moved to another location and fully tested for all pathogens and never return to that farm. Because I do not see an operation that has been working for the benefit of those animals. Those animals were used as a form of income through experimentation since 2020 by their own. If they want to say they weren't doing that, and that they never injected them with COVID, and they never were working with this researcher, which they have said to some people at the farm right now, If they want to say that, then the question is, so basically you were scamming people back then. Like you can't have it both ways. You can't say that was a lie, but this is a lie. And you can't say, oh, well, I'm only interested in now. Because now has to take account of what is the history of these animals. Were
Right.
they experimented on or not? And if they were, in what way, for how long, and in what conditions? And the
Yeah.
reality is, everybody's partying at a free range ostrich farm that each one of those birds has been injected, according to Karen, for the use of extracting antibodies to infuse into masks for humans to wear with COVID virus. That alone should terrify everyone. That alone, but that's not being introduced into court. And nobody's talking about that. Why isn't, as a police officer, knowing what's out there in the public view, I'd be saying, hang on a minute.
Wait, neither side. You saying neither side put that into the court record?
No, because all they're talking about is avian flu.
Well, I guess because it's water under the bridge, they're not doing anything more with it now.
How is it water under the bridge if it's the same animals? How is it water under the bridge for the freedom movement? How is it water under the bridge? Again, the reason the government doesn't want to bring it up is two things. One, they want to keep the COVID narrative alive, that COVID was deadly and everything else. And they don't want anybody to know that they were injecting these birds with COVID. Because somebody like me, I don't know why nobody else is, all these investigative journalists who've interviewed her, not a single one of them will ask the question, where did you get the COVID virus from?
I don't look. I think, everyone has their own passion of the hour, passion of the day, and there's so much going on.
This is important because they were working on stuff that directly impacted the continuation of the narrative that currently is allowing the COVID vaccination of the highest number of infants on the planet here in Alberta.
So that was a separate thing I wanted to talk to you about, because those numbers of ongoing vaccinations for Albertan kids, I was like,
it's not just the kids; it's in the care homes too, and it's happening. And where's the convoy for the kids? Where's the convoy for the care homes?
I don't think people are aware of it, because the stats.
It's published online.
But the stat you sent me was only 14%. It seemed low when you just read it.
No, again,
you had to. I know you had to. Right.
Yeah. So the government deliberately, if we stopped giving the COVID shots to infants, the 6-month-olds today, within 6 months, the government would say no infants had ever been vaccinated.
But
because they report the stats based on their current age, and this includes deaths as well. They report them based on their current age, not the age at the time they were vaccinated.
A 6-month-old baby, or a 1-year-old baby in Alberta is getting vaccinated, I'm guessing, for COVID in the doctor's office. They're not going to the pharmacist.
No. So 2 years old and up are at pharmacies. Under 2, AHS runs clinics.
At whose clinics?
AHS. At the direction of the government. The doctor doesn't do it at all. No, this is done by nurses.
Are you kidding me? So why would it not be?
That brings us to another point. The hero of the Alberta separatist movement? In 2021, AHS was injecting people. They were swapping out vaccines. They were actually giving old versions of vaccines. They were hiding the fact that people were collapsing. A nurse gave a statement with provable information, documents, names, and everything else to the hero of the freedom movement, Jeff Raff, in December of 2021, demonstrating the negligence of the government and AHS in injecting people in a way that informed consent could never be given. What did he do with that? He sent it to AHS, got the nurse fired, and then the nurse, when she called him and said, "You told me that this wouldn't happen," he laughed at her and said, "Yeah, I thought that would happen." She then went to the JCCF to help her because the college came after her, because AHS then followed up with a college complaint that she'd released public information, or she'd released information to the public she wasn't allowed to. They didn't say what she was saying was false. They agreed what she said was true, but it was private information that she shouldn't have given out. the college, with the help of JCCF lawyer Keith Pridgeon, buried that information, got her to sign an NDA, got her to pay a fine and everything else, punished her the same way as they punished everybody else in the complaint system, and buried that document. Do you know where Keith Pridgeon is today? The JCCF lawyer working with Jeff Rath and the rest of them, the heroes of the freedom movement. He's the chief of staff for the justice minister in Alberta. When I actually tried to get that information, he stopped the meetings. He basically obstructed justice. Information that was critical, that showed crimes had been committed because informed consent could not be given. We had 4 people in one clinic in the West End of Edmonton, mid-April, were rushed by ambulance to hospital at the same time. 4 people collapsed. They had to shut down the clinic for an hour. And at the end of that, they didn't shut down the clinic to say, have we got a bad batch or a problem here? No, they brought more staff in so they could catch up. There are 911 calls. There are ambulance dispatch notes that prove all of this. What did Jeff Rath do with it? Buried it. He's the hero.
Well, the question is, look, what could he have done with it in his capacity?
He had a duty, as a lawyer, he had a duty to report it to the police because it was part of a crime.
That's a tough. I would, if you're going to tell me everything I get for the rest of your.
So
no way. That's solicitor. Was it solicitor privilege? It wasn't privilege.
Then knowing it's not privilege because she wasn't his client.
Right.
He took a statement from her and then sent it over to AHS, which got her fired.
But hold on, why wouldn't he send it to AHS? Wouldn't that be the point of like the person to help?
He told him and his partner told her that they were just gathering the information to help Eric Payne's lawsuit, and it was just additional information they needed, and she would not be fired or impacted in any way. He knew very well the instant that he sent her over to AHS, she'd get fired.
And not really, but that's sharing. No, because she's sharing it internally with AHS. Why would she get fired for that?
No, she didn't. She didn't share it with AHS. She gave the statement to him, a lawyer.
Yeah, but the lawyer, that's solicitor. I mean, not solicitor, but
it's only privileged if he actually. He knew very well he was getting that. They wrote the statement. She didn't write the statement. They left out stuff that she said, this isn't what I actually said. And he said, just sign it anyway. They did it over a Zoom call. Sent it over to AHS. And when she called him, she was crying. And she said, I've just been fired. Jeff Rath laughed at her and said, yeah, I thought that would happen. I've got all the documents, the communications between her and Rath and Keith Pridgeon from that time. And the government knows that I've got that. And when asked about it by another investigator, Mickey Amery, the Justice Minister, said, we can't afford for anybody to know about that. It'll bring down the government. That's the crap that I've been trying to deal with while all these people, you know what, the convoy, what did it stop? Because every single one of those vaccinations given to kids from 6 months to 1 year in Alberta happened 6 months after the convoy. So what did the convoy stop?
Well, this is the thing. So you're telling me who's bringing their kids in? So what percentage of kids?
Okay, so do the math here. You're a parent.
Yeah.
You're a parent in Alberta, which is, as far as they're concerned, the left are concerned, we have the most anti-vax premier on the planet.
Right. But not the AHS. AHS seems to be very... No.
On the Alberta government website, it says, take your child to be vaccinated every 3 months. Moderna, FAC, NACI, all the bodies, CDC, FDA, say every 6 months. Alberta, every 3 months. It's actually within 4 to 8 weeks for the second. We have 3 shots within 3 months. So from 6 months to 9 months, 3 shots in 6-month-olds in Alberta has been going on since August 2022 under Danielle Smith. As of October 2022. She knew it was dangerous, and not only has she not stopped it, she's working with a company called 19 to 0, owned by the chief health advisor for the NDP, on the behavioral modification to persuade people through social engineering and paying right-wing social influencers to get people to get vaccinated. They used messaging
For COVID or for other things?
for COVID. This is all COVID. So none of that could have happened if it were not for companies like this farm proliferating the COVID narrative and making money from it. And why is nobody asking? Or
Well, but again, that was what they did back in
it's not the
2020,
past.
21.
It's not the past. Did they replace all the turkeys from 21 and get a whole new bunch of turkeys, ostriches? Sorry, raptor chickens. Did they get them? Did they had 500 of them in 2020? They've got 398 now. Where did 100 of them go? Did they sell them? We know 6 of them were sold to a farm in 2021 after they'd been experimenting with COVID vaccines or with COVID viruses. They're injecting birds with pathogens in their own words. They're not denying it, but they are denying it in interviews. And nobody wants to ask a question for it. But like you've said a few times, but it's in the past. How is it in the past if it's the same birds?
No, the activity of the research is in the past, but yes, the meat and the changes to the birds would be present. Fine.
And how many times? What other pathogens? Bearing in mind what this researcher is working on, one of the things he works on is avian flu. Now they're absolute dead certain that because a duck flew into their pack, which killed 2 ostriches, the rest of the pack are completely immune.
So a
How
lot of
immune?
I've got to head off.
Were they injected?
I've got to head off in a few, but
I'll stay on, but
yeah, you could. But the main thing is, well, first of all, in terms of the babies and how to stop them from getting, like, what do you see as the action items to get the vaccine not in the arms of these kids, or let's say fully informed of the parents or caregivers?
all this government has to do is stop lying and actually and bring the police in.
Well, that's a hard sell.
The evidence. So the COVID deaths have been
stop lying and bring the police in. That's no one's gonna.
Well, so I've got a police chief in Alberta who's willing to investigate it if he doesn't get blocked by the Alberta Justice Department, who are actively blocking it right now. And guess what? We got EPS involved, and EPS should have started the investigation, but instead of that, the chief of Edmonton Police Service resigned with 2 years left on his contract and took a job with the very people he should be investigating, who were named with documents and evidence proving that what they've done.
Okay, so that channel of stopping the vaccines is not going to work in the kids, or not. Let's say not stopping, but starting the informed decision process, because I don't think fully informed parents.
Suing people is not going to change anything. The reality is, if drastic action isn't taken, it's not going to stop.
But I'm thinking with even the College of Physicians for Alberta,
they don't regulate it. It comes directly from the government.
Yeah, but who's in the clinics? It's nurses.
AHS is,
but there's nurses
directly reports. AHS is completely governed by the Alberta government.
But the staff that works there, they're regulated professionals that are doing the injections.
Yeah, that's the College of Nurses and the College of Pharmacies.
But that I think that has to be the point of contact with the patient.
And they will say, so again, I've tried to find a patient. There is a patient that is vaccine injured with a recognized vaccine injury who is close to the chief that is quite happy to report this, and their lawyer is Jeff Raff. She's been told you have a criminal case for lack of informed consent and an assault. However, you will have to include your lawyer as part of that complaint.
Why the lawyer?
He's the one who buried the evidence that would actually stop this, that the injections were given improperly. Because you can't say whether it was her side effect because she was given an out-of-date vaccine, she was given the wrong vaccine, she was given it through a pre-filled syringe with what God knows what was in it, all information that he's aware of. They are all just as likely to have caused a side effect as the vaccine itself. Any one of those things. So the criminal complaint is she was not aware of the risks at the time. Her lawyer was. And her lawyer has not released that information.
No, but I think Yeah, maybe, but I think the real obligation for each of these injections is for the nurse practitioner, for the
No,
nurses
so no,
to fully explain
that's the
cost
only.
benefits,
Yeah.
right?
So
Lawyers
that
don't inject vaccines.
no. So everybody who's party, including the person who doesn't do the research, if they sign a consent form, there is contributory negligence there. The question is who it has the most level of negligence. The
Oh,
nurse
yeah.
is told it's safe and effective, and they are given. Most of them aren't even given. This nurse I spoke to in the clinics had no idea that AHS had an 8-page at the time vaccine consent form. She'd never seen it. It was never given to her. She was doing what she was told to do. And yes, that's not acceptable. And the colleges said, we will not defend you if you try and use that as a defense. But who had the information? The college is acting on information that was given to them by the government. Who actually has the information knowing this is unsafe the way it's being done? Some of the heads in AHS and all the people in the government. They have known it, and the lawyer who had it. So, yes, you can blame the nurse, and the nurse would be culpable in this action because that's the person or the pharmacist or whoever gave it. They are ultimately responsible for not getting fully informed consent. The law is very clear on that. But everybody that's party to it is an accessory. And
Mm.
do you think the nurse themselves is going to stop this rollout to the kids?
Well, I
No.
think the board of the directors, if of the college, maybe would be inspired if somebody spoke to them. But that's me kind of being a bit of idealist.
I've spoke to nurses who've spoke to them and have been
And
threatened.
they're gung ho. Oh, threatened.
Yeah, because you're going against the official narrative that the government.
But now
Remember,
the FDA. Hold on, let me see
the colleges are run by the government. The colleges
no,
exist at the government's behest. They can be
that.
fired. Their bylaws can be changed. Everything.
But
And they're not
it does require open debate to do that.
No, it
You
does
know.
not in Alberta. They can actually change their bylaws under the Provincial Health Act, under the Law Societies Act. They can go in and change the bylaws, fire the board. They've just done it with AHS. They can do the same with each of the regulatory bodies here in Alberta. They can actually disband them if they wanted to under the current acts that are in place. The power the government has is a little bit scary, but
Yeah.
and they do use it, and the people that are in those organisations know it. They're also the reality is they're not very good at doing investigations. So if you come to them with information, they really don't know what they're doing. Again, the only people who know how to do investigations, sadly, are police officers. But they won't do anything while the Justice Department, and here in Alberta, we've got a bit of a funny situation where both the Attorney General and the Solicitor General are actually the same person. They're supposed to be separate roles
Right.
that run two parts. I mean, this is why we've got the situation with AHS having all its land as a charity, having $13 billion taken by the government, and there's nobody to defend them because the person who defend them is the person who took it, which is the Justice Minister, working with the Infrastructure Minister. Nobody cares about that. They're going to care when everything changes. But the reality is, the only way this stops is if the government stops. Nobody else is going to stop it. And the only way to stop them is for a chief of police here in Alberta to grow a pair and stand up and do something. And there is one willing to do it. But guess who's stopping them? Lawyers in the freedom movement.
Mm. Well, that
No, and
lawyer is
yes,
one person.
no. There is more than one of them. There
Any
are
lawyer
multiple.
can help a police officer guide a police officer for something like this.
They
You don't
actually
need
have a duty to under the Law Society's Code of Conduct. If they are aware of a crime, they have to report
No,
it.
now you're well. That's too. I think that's too.
Aren't you the lawyer? I'm just a dumb police
Yeah,
officer.
but it's like it's taken
No,
people a lot of
uh,
time to
mm,
I
these.
these are not
Okay,
obvious
if you had evidence that these shots were being manipulated, that the COVID death information was being manipulated, would you just sit on it because I don't want to get involved? I've given that information directly. I've sat here with what is now currently the current sports minister, a junior MLA who's now been promoted to the sports minister, who has the information. Who said this is a crime? I'll get you in front of the justice minister.
I would give it to AHS, and then they'd fire the person. You can't do anything. I would give it to AHS.
No.
Why not?
He never introduced it into court.
What's that?
He never. Basically, once she was fired,
but that's not the duty. Now you're saying the duty is introducing.
No. He had evidence that would help his case for his clients, the doctors. He had direct evidence that benefited their case. He took that evidence and didn't use it. He basically laughed at the nurse and
That's
said,
different. No, well, that's different. Not filing it for a
is
civil case.
Is he not failing to represent his clients properly?
No, but you talk to different issue about this, about a different issue about whether it's rising to something more serious.
But
That
again,
Alberta.
more importantly, he's the same lawyer who directly asked questions of Dina Hinshaw. Why didn't he ask her questions about, have there been any ambulances called to vaccine clinics? Never asked that. Were there any policies about this, that, and the other? That he had direct evidence of. He had every right to ask her questions about. Never asked a single one of those questions. Questions that would have been critical for the Ingram case. Why didn't he ask them?
Yeah, well, you have to ask him.
He knows very well what I've got.
Anyway, I've got to sign off. I'll end with this, though. You know, it's easy for us to form a lot of opinions quickly and, you know, to take positions, especially online. Because people, but like people with the ostrich, like everyone comes up with a strong emotional opinion real fast. So, yeah, I guess the moral of the story is...
I don't. I come up with the facts.
Form your opinion slowly.
I'm a trained police officer. I look at the facts. And the facts speak for themselves. And they are not being honest about them. Either
to examine them, you've presented some interesting facts that people should consider and look at and form an opinion on what's with those facts. And they may still say, I still want to save the 400 ostriches, and let's do everything we can to save them nonetheless. So
again, and they're the same people that should be driving around with a mask alone in a car. Because the reality is, if you want to bury your head in the sand, then you may as well be an ostrich.
Oh, we're going to... Very well said. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Great seeing you. Ciao.
Maybe we'll do it again. Ciao. Okay. Anybody else want to stay online? I can't see the feed just because I'm not using the tools that I normally use. So I don't know what everybody's saying. I'll go over them later. But let's see if we can get some of these. I don't know why. I have no idea why my sharing screen has disappeared. Anyway, we've got the ostrich farm. Why is nobody asking any questions? It is absolutely crystal clear, based on the evidence they've presented themselves, that they have been injecting these birds with pathogens. That's not my words, that's their words. Go on Karen Esperson's LinkedIn profile and have a look what it says. Go on any of these articles. Go on my LinkedIn or Facebook and you'll see I'm linking the information, not that I said, they said. Who they're working with. They have confirmed they're working with this Japanese researcher on infusing masks for COVID. If you believe that we should all be wearing pathogen-infused or whatever you want to call it, I would say foreign antibodies from an animal would be pathogenic to human beings. These are zoonotic processes that I would not support. I don't support people putting masks on full stop. Not for these things that have happened in the last 5 years. But if you truly believe, if you're supporting this farm, then you have to believe in that, because that's their core business in their own words. If you want to save these ostriches, leaving them at the farm is not saving them. It's allowing them to continue to be experimented on, as they have been by this farm's own admission for the last 5 years. And during that 5 years, since they started injecting them with COVID spike proteins, in their own words, since then they have sold them to other farms, at least one other farm. They have also been producing and selling. The online store was still up to October of last year for ONU Body Caring, selling products from these ostriches. The contracts with Omega Ostrich Inc. Why have we changed all the names during the last 5 years? Why has everything disappeared? And what is really going on with the Calgary-based and in Alberta Struthio Bioscience? At the end of the day, these are not hard questions. We don't need a FOIP. Well, it wouldn't be FOIP anyway, it'd be PIPA. They're a private organisation. Where did they get the pathogens from? What pathogens have they injected into these birds? And who the hell thinks it's safe to keep them in an outside environment and then extract antibodies from them that have never been tested in any environment? You talk about the vaccines haven't been tested, but you're quite happy to put a mask on infused with COVID proteins from an ostrich that have been worked on by people who were selling ostrich meat 6 months before. Seriously, that's what you're defending. I don't know how why people are not asking that question. What is going on? It's not a hard question. It's not an unreasonable question. And when you get to the end of that, the question of should they cull, right now, I think we need more information. I think, yeah, you know what? I think CFIA should now investigate based on all the facts, not just based on 2 birds dying of avian flu. They should get to the bottom, along with the RCMP and anybody else that needs to be involved. What pathogens are on site? How were they transported there? How are they stored? How have they been used? Where have these birds gone? Where have the products of these birds been going for the last 5 years? This is the business model this farm's been running. You are effectively running and going to the biolab and saying, we want to protect the puppies you've been experimenting on so you can keep experimenting on them. How does that make any sense? How is that freedom? How is that fighting Big Pharma? You know, at the end of the day, who do you think, if they actually had something that worked, I don't know whether, I can't see they have, because this Japanese research has been working on it for decades, and I don't see people walking around with these masks on during COVID or flu season or anything else. So it doesn't seem to be working. But the experimentation continues. But do you really think if it worked, that Big Pharma wouldn't capture it? You know what? If you think they made a lot of money from one injection every 3 to 6 months, imagine how much money they'd have made selling you $50 to $100 masks that you wore for 8 hours a day and you had to wear every day of the week. They would have, the money they made in the vaccines would have paled when you look at how many masks. And, you know, people complaining about, well, if the masks are hazardous, why haven't they been put in biohazard containers? These people are giving you a mask that fits the definition when you take it out the packet of a biohazard. Seriously. Why are you not asking these questions? Why is Rebel News not asking these questions? Why is Viva not asking these questions? I promised I wouldn't have a go at Viva while Lion was on, but he's not on anymore. Viva, why did you deliberately say that you would not ask questions because COVID's in the past? Tell the people in care homes that are getting locked down week by week all across the world because they tested asymptomatically positive with PCR or RAT tests. Yeah, that's it. And when that happens and you get 2 in a place, as of August this year in Alberta, they had 15 days for every test. 15 days locked down in care homes. And then when they get sick, they send them to hospital and they're put on ventilators. They're not given antibodies. They're still dying. Kids, infants 6 months up, 28 a day in Alberta is the current average of COVID shots in infants 6 months and up to 1 year old. We're talking about 119 times as many infants have been injected with COVID shots since January 2025 than in the UK in the whole of the last year. The UK has 3.5 million infants of that age, under the age of 4, actually. We've got 235,000. 119 times as many. That's as of last week. This week, that number will go up again because we're still rolling it out and the boosters have just come out. Where are the convoys for the children? Where are the convoys for the care homes? It didn't even happen in 2022. And everything I'm talking about here for the COVID stuff has been happening since the convoy. So who did the convoy save? Because our all-cause deaths are going up, the lockdowns continue, the COVID shots keep rolling out. Who are they saving? Who did they save? I don't see them saving anyone. I've been relatively absent on social media for the last couple of months because I've been dealing with stuff on a daily basis in a care home. Abuse cases, thefts, and worse. That has resulted in the work that Karen and I have been doing in the arrest of one person and charges and investigations being kicked off by PPIC, Protection of Persons in Care, CCLO, the licensing body, and the head of Capital Care. But you know who's not interested in any of it? Despite reports of deaths and more, you know who's not interested and won't respond? The ministers, the MLAs, and that's on both sides. I've got information that Nenshi should be running to say, look at what you're doing to our citizens, our poor citizens in care, the vulnerable. Not a single one of them cares about it. I'm sending internal communications, documents, videos of incidents, because I've got cameras in there now. Not a response, not a squeak. My MLA, well, he's not saying anything because he's just been promoted to a minister for being a good little boy and burying all this. The evidence, you know what, Raf, come after me. I dare you. Because you know very well what I've got. And you just give me the opportunity to get it all in court and get you in front of a judge. And I'm good with that. Leighton Gray, JCCF, Kitchen, Eva, every single one of you. Every MLA, Nixon, LaGrange, Nicky Amery, come and get me. You know what I've got? Time we had a day in court and we actually ended this and stopped worrying about the raptor chickens that are part of experiments in BC. You know, this is what happened in 2022. The freedom movement was starting to make a difference. It was growing in the provinces. So what they needed to do was create a distraction and drag everybody off. And it worked. The freedom movement died in the provinces after the convoy. But you know what didn't stop? The lockdowns and the COVID shots. People just don't care about them because it's not happening to them. Why does everybody care about 398 raptor chickens that have been injected with God knows how many pathogens? But nobody even knows that the 6 months and up are still getting injected. And don't blame the parents. Because you know, the reason that, do you really think these parents want to put their kids at risk? No. You say, well, they haven't done their research. Well, guess what? Almost everybody who's been watching this and this rollout for the last 2 days hadn't done their research on a bloody ostrich farm, let alone COVID and all the propaganda that's gone with that. And why is it, out of the millions of birds that have been culled already in Canada, the only ones that people care about are ones that have been working in an operation directly related to the experimentation with masks and COVID, coronaviruses? I mean, where did they get it from? Did David Speecher get it? Give it to them, because he says in the beginning of 2020, he's one of the people that actually he actually isolated it. You know, everybody, Pat King and everybody else says, hasn't been isolated. Well, all you supporters of the Injection of Truth and the Gary Davidson report, which David Speecher contributed to, go listen to his speech, where he says outright in the 2024 Injection of Truth that was run by the Alberta government, the UCP, because the chief whip was the man behind it. That was run, and one of the guest speakers, Jeff Rath was there, Eric Payne was there from the same case, and David Speecher stated that he isolated the virus. So is that where this chicken farm? Because he's a big supporter of the chicken farm right now. Is that where he got it from? You know what? Where are all the critical thinkers? Where are all the people questioning what's going on? Oh no, let's have a party. It's May long weekend. Let's have a party. And don't be having a hard time against the poor raptor chickens. You know what? If it turns out they haven't been injecting them with stuff, then good for them. Get them some good homes. Get them some rescues. A friend of ours in England runs a rescue farm where they are pets. They are looked after. They're not used for experimentation or sold for meat or cosmetics. I don't get how people are so focused on protecting this biolab. You can't call it anything. Yeah, you know what they say? They're not a biolab. That should be scarier, because she says she had access, and the researcher that developed this process that they're working with says they have to be injected with the spike proteins, the raw virus. That is not something you can get hold of. And in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, some farm in rural BC not only had it, but was injecting birds that had access to all the other wildlife. And it was a virus that everybody was saying was a zoonotic virus that jumps from people to animals. Like, this is the stuff of the Contagion movie. This is borderline unbelievable by their own words. But they're not my words. Go do your research. Do you know how much research it took? And the reason I got involved a couple of days ago, I'd avoided this story because I've got more important things to be doing. I didn't want to do a podcast on bloody ostriches tonight. I wanted to be talking about what's going on in the care homes, what's going on with children. That's what I wanted to be talking about. But instead, we're talking about ostriches. But the reason I did is because my wife kept saying to me, but the poor ostriches. Because, as I say, she's worked rescue for 30 years. And she was worried about what the government was doing to these birds, and it was wrong. And I said, there's something off with this story. I don't want to be involved in it. So eventually, 2 days ago, sitting in bed, I pulled out my cell phone, and in 10 minutes, I found out all this information. And it was like, seriously, this is who we're protecting? This is not a family that are animal lovers who wants to keep these birds alive to live a ripe old age. For the majority of their existence, they have been bred for slaughter. And since 2020, they have been bred for experimentation and to be sold for slaughter. According to the information these owners have produced themselves. Either they've been lying for the last 5 years, or they're lying now. Which is it? Either one of them should make you wonder why you're there. Instead of trying to fight against the government doing what they're doing, make the government do their job. Not kill the animals. Find out whether because you know what? If you actually speak to one of these agencies and the courts and say, actually, it's not the avian flu that you should be worried about. Here's a list of pathogens that they allegedly have or haven't been injected in them. I tell you what, you'll get the animals tested then. And if it turns out they don't have avian flu or anything else, then I guess they're good. But you know what? While you play this game of, they need to be tested for avian flu, do you know 14 million birds? Have you got the tax dollars to pay for the testing of just since 2021, 14 million birds? Or are their ostriches more valuable than the farm down the road and their chickens and their cows and their whatever? What makes these ostriches so valuable? According to this farm, what makes them so valuable is the antibodies from the viruses they've been injecting them with. Odessa Orlowitz, you seem to have done another U-turn, starting to panic. TV Orion, what was the panic phone call to the angry Albertan through the Facebook? Trying to get ahead of the narrative is not going to work. They buried themselves. The question is, why are you not asking questions? Why are you just do you know, as a police officer, I don't bring someone in for interview and say, did you do it? No, I didn't, officer. Okay, then I'll let you go. Even though I've got all this evidence here that shows that you did do it. I'm going to let you go because you said you didn't. Did we do that with the government? So why are you doing it with this farm? When the evidence is overwhelming in their own words. Why are you giving them a pass? More importantly, why are you all there? You know what? Last year, no, year before now, Karen and I went to the ledge again. And we stood there on our own giving speeches. Nobody turned up. Trying to warn people about what was still going on with the vaccines and the masks and the isolation and everything. Nobody cared. These were children and the elderly. Nobody cared. I guess if it had brought a few ostriches into one of the clinics or got myself a few ostriches at one of the care homes, maybe we could have had a convoy. Pat King's producing documents to save the ostriches. How about producing some documents to save the kids and to save the people in care homes? Because what's going on in there now is terrifying. My mother-in-law's been in a care home for 13 years, the same care home. And what I'm seeing right now, compared to what went on in 2020, is terrifying. And my mother-in-law is the most monitored person in that environment right now. And they know, and they're still making mistakes they shouldn't be making. Something is wrong. And that comes down from the government. And yes, I have all the evidence to back it all up. Where are the lawsuits where's the constitutional lawsuits for the freedom of movement for the people in care homes that were locked in their rooms with red boxes outside them for weeks on end? Don't remember a single because you couldn't run a scam lawsuit with that and get all your donations. Notice all the same lawyers keep popping up. And then they all keep abandoning or losing their cases. Or when they think they win, they spin them badly. Open invitation for you, Separatist Jeff. Let me know if you want to come on the podcast and I'll ask you some questions. Keith Pridgeon, John Carpe, Mickey Amery, Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith used to actually trust the AAFI, adverse events following immunisation information I was sending her in 2020 and 2021. She knew it was deadly, so why was she telling all the nurses to get it in October to November in a fraudulent GoFundMe? Why is she working with the NGP's head health advisor on manipulating social influencers? Have you noticed how many social influencers keep flipping all the time on the Danielle story and on the COVID story? And it's choice. They all push choice. Well, here in Alberta, we've got the worst record because everything's been choice from day one. Because the easiest way to get people to do it is to give them a choice and manipulate them with coercive techniques. I could go on. Normally I would. This really was about the ostriches and trying to get people up to date on what's going on. Please go to my Twitter. On this, when I put this back up, I'll put the link to the latest thread and go, you know what, form your own opinion on the facts, not based on the propaganda. And ask yourself a question. Where are they getting the pathogens from? Because in order to make antibodies, the ostriches have to be exposed to the pathogens. How are the ostriches being exposed to avian flu, to swine flu, to COVID, to everything else? And why, of all things, have we picked masks? You know, the social engineering aspect of masks, not to mention the harm that they do and the lack of any efficacy in the way they've been used. But really, if they'd have beaten out Big Pharma, you'd have spent 2020 through to now wearing ostrich antibody infused masks every single day. Because guess what? As soon as they'd finished with you've had your COVID booster mask, now you need your influenza booster mask. And bird flu's around, so you better get your bird flu booster mask. Hopefully they color coded them, because you don't want to be putting the wrong mask on in the wrong season. It's like wearing a white hat after Labor Day. Wake up, everyone. This is nothing less than a distraction that everybody falls for. You know what? If somebody wants to ask, how the hell did so many people get fooled during COVID? All they have to look at is this story. Do you really think this got the attention in social media that it did because of public support? What gets published in social media is primarily controlled by the people who control social media. I've been lecturing about this for decades. I actually lectured and advised Microsoft's VPs and their chief security officer in April 2017 based on the papers I was producing. Yeah, I do know what I'm talking about in this area. This story got the legs and the convoy just like the last convoy. Seriously, while everything else that's going on, everybody's driving out to some farm in the middle of nowhere, that's primary business model is experimenting out in the open, but they're not a lab. So if they're not a lab, how are they storing this? How are they using it? Which of the scientists have they got on staff who knows how to properly handle pathogens? Or are they just winging it? Remember, ostriches can't fly. But remember to donate after you voted. Because you know what? If you just donate a little bit harder, nothing will happen. If you want these animals tested, expose the whole story to the government and demand they're tested for every pathogen. Because you know what? If they don't have anything and this has been some sort of scam and that this story isn't true and they haven't been injecting and they have no pathogens, then the ostriches will get freedom. I would still say they're not in safe hands where they are, but at least they'll get tested. But while you keep pushing back, guess what? CFIA is going to come in and kill all those birds. And if they do have multiple pathogens, and that's being run as some sort of co-project, either directly or indirectly with the Canadian government or other governments, Japan or whatever, then that evidence is going to disappear. So maybe you want to actually keep all this stuff so you can actually get the evidence. You know what? I agree. Test the birds, but don't test them just for avian flu. Test them for everything. In fact, test the whole farm. Search the farm. Search their records. Search their deliveries. Find out what's really going on there. Because the reality is, this is not just about protecting the birds. This is about finding the truth. Because if you don't find the truth, this never ends. And do you know what might happen if you expose something going on between the governments and this farm? We might actually expose some other crap that's gone on with COVID that continues to this day. All it takes is for one crack to appear, and the house of cards falls. But while you keep chasing the ball, that somebody else controls the narrative and not doing even the most basic of research. Yeah, we are lost. We are as lost as those ostriches are. So keep attacking me. Keep attacking the Angry Albertan site as well. Although, don't know why you want to attack him. I'm the one producing the information. Keep attacking me. Carry on. I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm still going to keep doing what I'm doing to protect the people in this province and outside of the province and helping people who are suffering right now with their families, with deaths, with attacks from colleges, etc., as I have been since the beginning. I will never stop fighting for the most vulnerable, for the people who don't have a voice, because that's why I put a uniform on all those years ago. But I will not stand by while grifters take advantage, while stories are spun. There is more going on at that farm, and it's more than just the CFAA and that court case. And if you're not asking questions about that, then you are the problem. So start asking questions, and then maybe we'll get some answers. But I'll guarantee you, nobody who's there wants answers. None of the participants, Viva and all the others, they're all doing deals with the wellness company. The wellness company that's importing all sorts of stuff, except they're not getting across the border because they've not got a license to import drugs into this country. So, when you buy their biohazard packs, well, maybe they were getting the pathogens from Peter McCulloch and his people. As far as I understand, that's where Macus is getting his stuff from, through a third party. Start asking some questions. Who's paying these people to not ask the questions? I don't get paid to do any of this. Everything I do is pro bono. My business is helping people. My business used to be helping businesses, and I did well out of it. For the last 5 years, all I've done is try and help people who couldn't help themselves. And watching how the freedom movement has manipulated and played games with people's lives. Line says there, well, I don't think people know. It's public information. They all knew during COVID. Oh, but you don't know when it doesn't affect you. Well, how did you know about the ostrich farm? Because you were told to pay attention to it. But you were also told to not do any digging. A basic Google search, going on the owner's own LinkedIn profile, looking at the websites. Most of them have been deleted recently. Doing a search for the company or the researcher and what they're actually doing. And if it doesn't scare you, if it doesn't make you want to ask questions, then you are lost. You were as lost as the people driving around in cars wearing masks alone. That still happens to this day. They're truly broken. But what makes you any less broken? If you can't see through the bullshit, or bird shit in this case, remember, had this farm been successful in what you want them to continue doing, those masks that many people gave up their jobs because they didn't want to wear, wouldn't have just been masks. They would have been COVID antibody infused masks through a zoonotic process that had never been tested, produced from an ostrich farm in rural BC. Yeah. You know what? If you think 2020 went bad, I can pretty much say that that would have been worse. Do your research, people. I will be doing another podcast, but I think this one's over. Sadly, the numbers are going up. There's lots of people watching. Watch it again. Go watch some of my old podcasts. Ask questions. I'll try and get to the answers. If you're abusive or ask stupid stuff, I will just block you. After 5.5 years, I don't have the patience. Every single day, I'm trying to help people. If you're going to come and attack me and say stupid stuff, or tell me Pat King's a hero and oh, it's never been isolated, who cares? The reality is, isolated or not, existing or not, the one thing we know is COVID wasn't deadly. Whatever it was, whatever they called it, it wasn't deadly, because if it was, everybody would have been dead before the first lockdown. Where are all the bodies from the first lockdown? Spikes in all-cause mortality didn't happen till after a country. I can tell you when a country or a province, or even a city locked down, if you give me the all-cause mortality data for that location. This government in Alberta is manipulating the information, and they're doing it in conjunction with the FDP's health advisors in order to achieve what they have been achieving. The highest rate of infant COVID vaccination on the planet. That's free separatist Alberta for you. More lockdowns than anywhere else. Masks. Right now, a lockdown, 15 plus days for every single case, rolling for every single case. Masks, gowns, gloves, face shields or goggles. Isolated in their rooms. Yeah, worse than what happened in 2020 happens today under the direction of the Alberta government. And yes, they do know about it. I've got all the read receipts. I've got the recorded conversations. Hey, Andrew Bachenko, at some point this is all going into the courts. And everything you've ever said to me, you are going to regret. I have not finished. I will not stop till somebody stops me. Too many lives are at stake. I will not stand by while children are hurt, while the vulnerable are hurt. And anybody who supports or participates in the stuff that led to this or allows this continues, you can go burn in hell. Do some research. How you can support a company that basically was pushing to make money, and probably did make money, because I don't know how they existed as a business. Because you know what? It's not cheap keeping ostriches. They're not fed on air. Just the cleanup is difficult. So where did their money come from when their business model says it came from the experimentation in 2020 with COVID viruses? And since then, they've been selling these birds into the food chain, into the cosmetic industry chain, and they wanted to use zoonotic infused masks for people to put on. Would you put them on? Because if you're at the ostrich farm right now, then do me a favor, ask them to hand you some avian flu infused masks and wear them 8 hours a day and live stream it for us. You want to support them, support their business model. Good night, everyone.